office. And although I've pretty much met everyone in here already, for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Helen Hellmuth. I'm a senior advocate at Disability Rights New York. DRNY is a non-profit law office that provides free legal and advocacy services to people with disabilities when they have a legal issue that relates to their disabilities. I like to start, you're gonna see me check behind me for the PowerPoint, but it's in front of me. Typically I have on the slide, why me? Why am I qualified to talk to you all about voting? I've been at DRNY for, it'll be 9 years in January, and in addition to assistive technology, has focused on voting access, and I feel very passionately about getting out the word about voting. And importantly to note, DRNY, we are nonpartisan. Does anyone know what nonpartisan means?
Just means not belonging in a party, right?
Exactly. We do not support or endorse any specific candidate or party. We give people the tools to vote however they would like to vote. That's an important piece. So before we get started, Saturday, October 26th is the Golden Day. And should I pause? Are we good? Okay. The reason that we're calling Saturday, October 26th, the Golden Day is because it is the last day that you can register to vote, and it is also the first day of early voting. So in theory, you could go to your county board of elections office, register, hop in your car, go to an early polling place, and vote that same day. That has never happened in New York State because we've never had early voting in, actually, let me back up. I don't think this has ever happened in New York State where the dates have lined up, but early voting is still very new in the state of New York. Within the last five years, 6 years max, very new. So early voting allows you to vote 10 days leading up to the election. So starting this Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, nothing on Monday, and then Tuesday's election day. You can vote at any early polling place in your county, but you have to go to your assigned polling place if you choose to vote on election day. And I'll also say, because of the size of this group, if there's any questions at any point, just shoot a hand up or holler. No need to wait until the end or anything.
For early voting, where do you go for early voting?
So you would check the we're in Broome County,
Yep.
the Broome County Board of Elections website will have the list of all the early polling places in the county, along with the times that they're open. So election day, yeah.
I'm going by memory, you can go to the Broome County Library, here, not too far from here, on the east side. I think the Endicott, City Hall, kind of across from the high school there. And there's a
I was gonna
third
say, I
place
think
that
right
we-
here, right?
Oh, this is the third place.
Yeah.
Right here, yeah.
So,
That's going by memory, so don't hold me to it.
but yeah. Great question. And the hours, that's an important thing to check, because on election day, polls are open everywhere from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. But during early voting, it's scattered. So one day it might be open from 9 to 1, and the next day it might be open from 10 to 6. The hours are different. So just make sure you check before going to vote early. Great question. Very basic voter eligibility. Is it all right if I make this full?
Yes, and you just have to keep the YouTube page open, so you can't do like projector mode.
Okay. Is this?
Yep, I can see that.
Okay, perfect. It was just a little small text, so I couldn't read it from
Yeah,
here.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I just pulled it up. It's 5 places: Broome County Library, the library in Endicott, where you said, Oakdale Commons, the mall, here, and the Vestibule Library. And all of the days are either 9 to 5 or noon to 8. The noon to 8 is Monday and Tuesday. All the rest are
Okay, so fairly straightforward. I come from Rensselaer County, which you may have seen them in the news for one of many things, but their elections and organization is not always it can be all over the place in terms of hours. Basic voting eligibility, you have to be a US citizen, you have to be at least 18 years old, but you can register to vote when you're 16. And then when you turn 18, you don't have to do anything. You're all set to go. That's also a fairly new change to election law in New York State. So if you have any kids, nieces, nephews, friends, when they get their permit, they can also pre-register to vote. You have to live at your current address for at least 30 days. You can only be registered at one address. You cannot be in prison serving time for a felony conviction, but New York State, compared to other states, actually has very generous eligibility for people who were formerly incarcerated. If you finished your time for a felony conviction, you can vote. If you're in jail serving time for a misdemeanor, you can vote. If you're on probation or parole, you can vote. And if you're in jail awaiting trial for a felony conviction, you can still vote. So only if you're actively serving a felony sentence are you not able to vote.
So they have voting boxes in jails?
That would be fantastic if they did. So if you're in jail, you vote absentee.
Oh.
So you have to request it and have your ballot mailed to you, you fill it out, and then you mail it back. It would be, oh
The
yeah.
League of Women Voters is actually going to jails and giving out absentee ballot applications and the like.
That's amazing. Every year or every election cycle, our office sends letters to the heads of the county jail and basically say, like, the people who are incarcerated there have a right to vote. It would be great if you posted this sign in a common area, if you want us to go out and give a presentation or help register. But not surprisingly, it's very difficult to get places to agree to let us in. Backtracking just slightly about DRNY, because this, I promise it's on topic. Our DRNY is the Protection and Advocacy Agency for New York State. Every state has a protection and advocacy agency, and that system was created after the horrors of Willowbrook were exposed. They said, we need people to watch what is happening where these people with disabilities are being cared for, being served, to make sure that nothing is going on. And so the P&As have the authority to go into group homes, jails, prisons, nursing homes, and we have monitoring authority. So we can show up unannounced, especially if we get a tip from someone, we'll always go and check things out, or just schedule monitoring visits to make sure everything is going well. So we find ourselves in county jails, but it's typically to investigate instances of abuse and neglect. And we don't have the authority to just march in and say, we want to give a voting presentation. It doesn't cover that. Only a judge can make the determination that someone is not competent to vote. We'll get into that in a minute. And you also cannot claim the right to vote anywhere else. So similarly to those formerly incarcerated, New York State has generous laws regarding guardianship and voting. So we're on the next slide. Guardianship status alone does not determine your voting eligibility status. A judge needs to make a separate order saying this person does not have the competency to vote specifically. If my colleague was here, she typically does this part of the presentation because she is very well spoken on it, but essentially prior to there being 17A and Article 81 guardianship, there was, it wasn't guardianship, anyone know? It wasn't power of attorney, it wasn't conservatorship, but it was a different style of guardianship. It didn't have the name guardianship. And in all the laws, it deemed people like incapacitated. They don't have the capacity to do these things. Well, now with Article 17A and 81, they don't use the word capacity, they use the word competency. And so nothing in guardianship in the letter of the law says anything about capacity. And you can go on OPWDD's website, state government websites, and they all agree that guardianship status alone does not determine voter eligibility status. Do you have a question? Looked like you might have wanted to ask one. No? Okay. Yeah. Oh, you're good. So the exact law says no person who has been adjudged incompetent has the right to vote unless later adjudged competent. Of course, receipt of services for mental disability does not deprive someone of their right to vote. And also, there is rules and regulation for community residences that a statement of the right of persons living in such residences must include information about the right to vote. So we have all these protections in our state law that says people with disabilities have the right to vote, and guardianship status does not determine that. For the people online, I believe everyone here is registered, but very briefly, how to register. The deadline is October 26th. If you have a DMV issued ID, the fastest way to register is online through the DMV website. If you don't have a DMV issued ID, then you would need to register on using a paper form. And if anyone here is not registered, I can help with that. I brought forms today and can assist. Where can I vote? Here we go. At any early polling location in your county, at your assigned polling place on election day. And this website here shows you where you can find your assigned early polling place. That website also will pull up every early polling place in the county. And you can vote early by mail. And the deadline to request that is October 26th. So, very brief history lesson. In New York State, prior to COVID, absentee ballots was the only way to vote by mail. And you needed to have an excuse to vote by mail. You needed to either have a disability, be a primary caregiver of a person with a disability, be incarcerated, or out of the county on election day, making it so that you couldn't be there in person. COVID hit, and they said, we want to open this up to let people vote by mail, less people at the polls, less spread of contagion. So then after COVID, people in New York State were like, wow, that was awesome. We should try to change the state constitution to say anyone should be able to vote absentee. You shouldn't need an excuse. That did not pass, but the way around it is we now have early mail voting. So it's not absentee voting, but you do get a ballot. Anyone can request a ballot to be mailed to them, and then they can mail it back. So it makes it, again, really easy if you are the type of person who wants to have your ballot and really research what's going to be on it, or just take time to get to know your ballot. You can vote by mail. Anyone can. Voting rights in New York State. You can vote for whoever you want to. Your parents can't tell you, your teachers, your doctors, your friends. You have the right to vote for whoever you want to vote for. And if you're registered as a Democrat, you can vote for the Republican candidate. If you're registered as a Republican, you can vote for the Democrat. You can vote for third parties. You can vote for anyone on general election day. During the primaries, it's a little bit different because New York State has a closed primary system, so you're only voting for the party that you're registered for to decide who's going to be on the ballot in the general. But for purposes here today, you can vote for whoever you want. You have the right to vote privately and independently. On the next slide, we'll see how people who are blind are still able to mark their ballot privately and independently. Quadriplegics can vote privately and independently. In New York State, we have a machine that allows people to do that. You have the right to an accessible polling place. You have the right to use an accessible voting machine, also known as a ballot marking device, which is what we'll get into on the next slide. You have the right to get help with voting from a person of your choice as long as it's not your boss or a representative of your union. So if you want to bring someone into the poll booth with you to help you mark your ballot because you don't feel like you have the dexterity or you're afraid you're going to make a mistake, you can bring your friend, your partner, your parent, anyone of your choice, except for your boss or union rep, to help you with marking your ballot. You have the right to vote absentee, early mail, or accessible ballot. So if you are a person who has a print disability, so if you're blind, if you have difficulty with reading, if you have any impairment any sort of disability that would prohibit you from being able to hand mark your ballot, you can request that a ballot be emailed to you and you complete the ballot on your computer. You then have to print your ballot and mail it in. That's kind of where the shortfall is, but hopefully we will eventually get to a place where you're able to electronically return your ballot if you're in that situation, because most blind folks don't have a printer to print their ballot, that they would need to mark on their computer using their own adaptive equipment.
Where would they go to get that?
So online on the county board's websites, you can request, it's called an accessible ballot. An accessible ballot. And that's also extremely new. My office at Hernandez, the New York State Board of Elections helped pass this. And again, get your ballot electronically and also electronically. Those are in states where overseas and military voters already have that right to electronically return their ballots. It's real easy for those states to say, hey, you already have this system in place. People with disabilities also need access to this. Please give it to them. New York State overseas and military voters do not have the ability to electronically return their ballots. But if they do ever get that, then you can bet that disability access won't be far behind.
Can you get one of those through the state DOE too?
I feel like you can probably request it on the State Board of Elections website. There's also a part of me that thinks they might redirect you to the county board's website. But you can always, if you ever have a question, you can always start on the state board website and they will typically have it. And if not, they might redirect you. You have the right to request a provisional ballot. This is a big one. So if you show up to vote and you go to check in and you say, I'm Helen Hellmuth, I'm here to vote. And they look and they say, your name's not in the poll book. You're not eligible to vote. You can't vote here today. I would say, I would like a provisional ballot. Because what this does is it allows you to mark a ballot, but rather than scanning it and having it be counted, the poll workers take it and hold on to it. And then once the polls close, they verify whether or not you're actually eligible, registered to vote. It might have been a mistake or a glitch in their iPad system. Maybe you registered on October 26th and then you went to vote on the 26th and it hasn't updated in their system yet. And so you're not in there. If you take one thing from this presentation, if you go to vote and they say no, ask for a provisional ballot because that allows you to mark the ballot and then everything will be sorted out and hopefully the ballot will be cast so long as everything comes back green light that you are in fact registered and eligible. You have the right to vote in line, or you have the right to vote if you are in line when the polls close. So on election day, polls close at 9 p.m. If you get there at 8:55 and then it's 9:01 and you're still standing in line, you have the right to vote because you were there before 9. Do not get out of line. Do not go to the bathroom. Stand and wait. But so long as you're in line before the polls close, you're good. Ballot marking devices. These are my babies, my pride and joy. So I work in voting access and I also work in DRNY's assistive technology program. And so this is kind of like a beautiful merge of those two things that I work on every day. HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, was enacted in 2002. And that law required that everyone have the right to a private and independent vote and that there be a machine that allows people who are unable to hand mark their ballot, to be able to have a way to privately and independently mark their ballot. And I didn't update. This is slides from one of my last presentations. So you can see down there, it says Suffolk County uses the Dominion, Nassau uses the ImageCast. I'm not sure if there's a cell phone out there you could figure out what Broome County uses. But essentially, these are machines that when you check in, you get your ballot, you say, I want to use the BMD, and the poll worker will say, okay, here's the BMD. You go over, you put your ballot into the machine, and then it's read on the screen to you. And there are a bunch of different adaptive features on the BMD, depending on your disability and what needs you have. They have a touchscreen feature if they use the ImageCast, but if not, they have, it's called an ATI, but it's basically a video game controller that allows you to click through the ballot. They have headphones, so the ballot can be read to you. You can change the contrast on the screen so that it's black and white and it's easy to read. You can make the text really big. They have a sip and puff, so if you're quadriplegic and you don't have use of your arms or legs, you blow and suck on a straw, and that goes through the ballot and then marks it for you. It is an incredible machine. And all this machine does is it marks your ballot, and then it prints it out, and then you go and scan it. But an important note is you don't need to have a disability to use the BMD. It's actually a fantastic advocacy tool for people who don't have disabilities, because I always ask to use it. And as amazing as these machines are, they do, they're not always at the top of mind for poll workers, or so it seems, because we hear a lot of issues of the machine wasn't turned on, or the ink wasn't replaced and it dried up, and so it can't actually mark the ballot, or it malfunctions. Any array of things can happen. And so when I go in and ask to use it, it ensures that the machine is working. And so that the person who comes in behind me, if they need to use it, it's all set and ready to go. But if I go in and ask to use it and then an error happens, techs can come and they can fix the machine, and then I am able to either wait for them to fix it, or I can hand mark my ballot, and it ensures that the person behind me who needs to use the machine isn't waiting sometimes hours for the machine to be fixed, or they then need to have poll workers help them mark their ballot. So we love ballot marking devices. We love them as an advocacy tool. And yeah.
Actually, know someone who experienced that. He's in a wheelchair, doesn't have great use of his hands, so he was gonna use that, but it wasn't on. And it took it a long time to get it turned on, and like he felt some type of way about that, like having to just sit there while everyone just, left.
Absolutely. It's exclusionary. It makes it so everyone else is in and out in 10 minutes, and then you feel like you're making this big commotion, but it's your right. And that's what I mean when I said, like, they're not at the top of everyone's priority list. They don't think to turn it on. And we've heard rhetoric from poll workers saying, oh, I've worked at this poll site for 20 years. No one here ever uses it. And maybe it's an attitude thing, or maybe someone is scared to ask to use it, or maybe someone just moved into your county and they're going to use it for the first time. So there's all these different things, and we're actually going to get into on the next slide what to do.
About the training of poll workers is minimal, which is the crux of the problem.
And we've seen that, and there's so many poll workers that need to be trained, and it's a human system. So of course there's going to be human errors, and we're all in the disability field. So we know the importance of these machines, but the poll workers don't necessarily have that same passion behind it. See him back.
So Broome County uses the ClearMark system?
Okay, so that is one of the new ballot marking devices. So it's should be less likely to give you error messages. That said, my county uses the clear ballot. And it's really interesting because you check in. The older machines, you would always go in, you'd get your ballot, and then you bring your ballot and you put it into the slot, and then it's read to you. The clear ballot, you'll go in, check in, they'll give you your ballot, and then you say, I want to use the ballot marking device. They actually take your ballot, and then they write on it like ballot marking device, and they go to the BMD and they type in like a code to get your ballot up, but you don't actually put your ballot into the clear ballot, which that's for better or for worse. It went through a very long certification process with the State Board of Elections that I've spent many years trying to understand, but don't quite. But would encourage anyone to use it. You just need to tell a poll worker that you're using it, where these other ones, you'd be able to walk over and just use it. So the next slide, my rights were violated, now what? The self-advocacy aspect. On election day, you can advocate for yourself. If the ballot marking device isn't working, you can say, well, I'm gonna wait for the machine to be fixed because I have a right to a private and independent vote, and I want to vote using the ballot marking device, so I'll wait. If you check in and your name isn't in the poll books, you can say, okay, well, I know I have the right to a provisional ballot, so I would like to use a provisional ballot. So self-advocacy is always number one.
I had that happen before where I was registered to vote and I went and go to get my ballot. They're like, you're not in the books. I'm like, well, I got this business card saying I'm registered to vote at this address. And when they saw the card, they were like, oh, you are.
Yeah, self-advocacy in the works. That's awesome, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's not always easy to speak up for yourself. So that's awesome. You can also call an election protection hotline. So 866 Our Vote is the national hotline. And what's nice about that hotline is they have a bunch of different languages available to provide real-time assistance, either giving you strategies on what to do or connecting you with the Board of Elections office. And DRNY, we're hosting a election protection hotline during business hours, so between the hours of 9 to 5 throughout early voting and on election day. And our number is 518-432-7861. And we will be giving real-time technical assistance to, again,
Can you get that number again?
yeah, 518-432-7861.
And who was that?
That's DRNY. The other number is 866 Our Vote. It's been a while since I needed to text on like a flip phone, so I don't know off the top of my head the numbers that correspond. Okay.
I'm sorry, what are these numbers to? Like, what do they help with?
So if you get to the polls and you run into an issue where, again, your name's not in the poll book and you ask for a provisional ballot and they say, I don't know what you're talking about. Again, this is just an example. You can call an election protection hotline and they can say, no, you have the right to a provisional ballot. You can go up to the front desk and say, I need a provisional ballot, like demand one. And again, just give you kind of technical assistance. If you're someone who uses a wheelchair and you get to your polling place and there's no ramp, there's no way for you to get inside. Call one of these numbers and be like, what do I do? So those are what you can do on election day if your rights were violated. After election day, once you leave the polls, say you asked to use the ballot marking device and the poll worker said, it's not turned on, it's gonna take like 20 minutes to boot up. I honestly don't remember if there was ink in it from yesterday, so why don't we just help you mark your ballot instead? And you think, okay, and you get the assistance, but then you get home and you say, oh, I remember that presentation that girl Helen put on, and I have a right to a private and independent vote, and I wasn't able to vote privately or independently. What do I do? So number one thing is to record or write down your experience. So voice memo or write it down on paper, something while the memories and the details are fresh in your head. I checked in, spoke to this poll worker. If you have their name, awesome. If not, it doesn't matter. I asked to use the BMD. They discouraged me from using it. This is exactly what they said. And the reason that those details are so important is because you can then contact DRNY, an independent living center, HCA, some disability rights advocacy group for assistance and guidance. And if there's been a violation specifically of Title III of the Help America Vote Act, you have the right to file an administrative complaint. Now, Title III of HAVA is that law that guarantees you the right to a private and independent vote. So if that is not upheld in any way, you can file a HAVA complaint. And so going back to the story of the person who asked to use the ballot marking device and it took forever to use, that would be a violation of Title III of HAVA, because another aspect of it is they have to allow for participation in a manner that is the same as people without disabilities. So if it takes someone 30 minutes to use the BMD because it's not turned on, not immediately available, versus 5 minutes for someone over here, that's not fair, and you can file a complaint for that. DRNY, we help file these complaints. They're free to file. You do need to have a notary signature when you're filling out the complaint, but otherwise completely free. It's not a lawsuit, so there's no like monetary reward for anyone. It's a way to air your grievances, for the State Board of Elections to hear what happened and then order the county board to make changes so that it doesn't happen in the future. So all of them are public record. If you go on the State Board's website, they're really interesting. You'll see my name and my colleague's name all over the place because we file them a lot, sadly. You can also file a complaint with the Attorney General's office. They have a submission form online, and you can also write a letter to your County Board of Elections office just explaining what happened. And again, going back to that second bullet, you can contact DRNY, HCA Cares, or any other disability advocacy group, and they can help write a letter to send to the County Board of Elections if that's something that you're interested in. So voting is so big. There are so many things to talk about. And so I wanted to try to fit as much as I could into this presentation. So if it feels like a lot of information, it's because it is. What's on your ballot is a big question. And I always like to say a ballot is not election day is not a pop quiz. It's an open book test. You know what's going to be on there, and you know the answers to everything. You don't want to get there and be like, oh, I had no idea that I was voting for my senator today. You want to know everything that's on there. And every ballot has different candidates and propositions depending on where you live. You can get a sample ballot by going to your County Board of Elections website or ballotpedia.org. You can put in your address, and then it will pull up a sample ballot of all the candidates and all the propositions that'll be on your specific ballot. You want to know who you're voting for going into it. And this is just the next slide, researching candidates and ballot proposals. In a world of social media and sound bites and clickbait, it's more important, and AI, it's more important than ever to know that where you're getting your information on candidates is factual. I always say be cautious of information you get from social media, especially short video clips or article headlines. There are several different ways that you can learn about candidates. You can go to their campaign website and see what they say they stand for. You can watch candidate debates. And then all these websites, ballotpedia.org, vote411.org, votesmart.org, and factcheck.org are all nonpartisan websites that provide factual-based information on candidates. It shows where their campaign funds come from. It shows how they voted on different things in the past. So if you care very passionately about the environment and environmental rights, you can see if the candidate is getting money from a big oil company or where their stances are on how they've voted in the past on policies that involve environmental protections. So it gives you that power to figure out what's going on. A couple of my personal favorites, I really like votesmart.org. I think it's a very user-friendly interface. You type in the name of the candidate, and then they have these manila envelopes across the top that say like votes, funding, background, and you just click on them, and then you can see their positions on those things. And they also have a compare tool, so you can put two candidates next to each other side by side on that website and go through each thing. Factcheck.org is another great one where if you see something on social media, if you see a video clip and you're like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. Factcheck.org has a drop menu with the different candidates, and you click on them, and what they do is they basically scour the internet for posts and news articles about the candidates, and they do a deep dive and they say, yes, this is true, and this is why what they said is true, or this is misrepresented, this actually isn't true. So it's a great place to go and double check to see what is being said.
I have a question on that part.
Yeah.
Because I know the two candidates that I've been eyeballing looking at and educating myself a little bit on. Mark Marinero, give you a good example for him. I really like Mark Marinero because he really supports people with developmental disabilities. But on the other hand, with Mark Marinero that he's presenting and want to push for is birthrights. Or having a woman's rights being taken away that she can't has that right to have birth control. I feel that shouldn't take place.
It's tough, right? Because these candidates are as dynamic as all of us. And so there's pieces of it where you're like, I really, really resonate with this, but I really don't resonate with this. And that goes back to it's your choice. It ultimately comes down to you and what means, what's important to you, what means the most to you, and who gets the privilege of having your vote. But I empathize with that. It's not an easy spot to be in.
No.
Yeah.
Because what if the person was raped and then they were forced to have this child? That's going against the constitutional rights.
It's funny that you say constitutional rights, because also, if you ever need help reading through information on candidates, talk to someone that you trust. Talk to someone that you trust.
Sorry, I threw that out there.
No, it's perfect, because the next slide is Proposition 1, the Equal Rights Amendment, which is a proposed amendment to the state constitution, which is going to be on the ballot this November, or this week, starting Saturday. In New York State, for there to be an amendment to the state constitution, it is a very long process. The proposed amendment needs to pass through the legislature twice, which means it has to pass through the House and the Assembly, which takes 2 years, and then it needs to pass through the House and the Assembly again, which takes another 2 years, and then it needs to go to the governor to be approved to go on the ballot, and then it goes on the ballot, and then people have to vote on it. So it's a 4-year process for there to even be a suggestion for an amendment to the state constitution. It's very hard to pull back on things that are codified in the Constitution, because it would take 4 years to get to that point, and then the people would need to vote on it.
Why does it go through twice? Does it change the second time around, or?
It needs to, I think it's just checks and balances. Like, they need to hone in and make sure that it's written as they want it written. It's just the rule. It's got to go through twice. Great question. So it goes through twice, and then it's voted on. As we've seen in the past, again, kind of going on reproductive rights, laws can be weakened, and we saw that with Roe v. Wade, with Dobbs. All of a sudden, the power goes to the states, and the states have the right to make these different rules about reproductive health care. The Voting Rights Act, we were talking about that. We used to have really strong protections in place where states that were formally found to have made racist choices in selecting election districts, they used to need to report to the state before making any changes to polling places to make sure that they weren't making
Justice Department.
the Justice Department. Thank you. So they used to need to report before they made any changes to make sure that they weren't making racist decisions. Well, with a constitutional amendment, that can't be weakened. And so it's embeds these into our Constitution. And Prop 1, which will be on the back of your ballot, proposes an amendment so that in New York State, you cannot be denied rights based on disability, ethnicity, national origin, age, sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy. Right now, our state constitution only protects based on religion, creed, and race. Women are not protected in our state constitution. So there's a lot of information online about Prop 1. The League of Women Voters has a lot of information on it. So something that'll be on every ballot in New York State, and I just like to bring that to people's attention. Okay, why vote? Because every vote matters. You will hear, I don't know if you will hear, I hear at voter registration drives, oh, I don't vote, my vote doesn't matter. It doesn't even count, like they probably aren't even counting my ballot. It doesn't matter. But these are specific examples in New York State of where races were decided by very few votes. I also should edit this. I forgot to edit from last time. This is 10 votes, not 47. So in 2019, in the Queens District Attorney's race, in a district with 2.5 million people, the election was decided by 55 votes. That is less than 1% margin of victory. In 2021, for the Buffalo mayoral primary race, India Walton won. During that primary, 1 in 5 voters voted. In the general election, the incumbent mayor, Brown, ran a very strategic write-in campaign. And although he wasn't even on the ballot, he won the race. And in that election, 3 in 5 voters went to vote. And so it makes you wonder if more people had voted in the primary, would Brown have been the candidate? Or if it's just an interesting math there. And then 2022, the Senate race for John Mannion, who's now the chairman of Committee on Disabilities, won by 10 votes. 10. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 10 people in this room. That's the difference one vote can make. I think there's 9. 9 people, but.
I can give you a little extra on cats.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like, down somewhere, but I'm probably going to get some detail here. But a couple of years before her district attorney race, she ran for Congress. And in the Democratic primary, she lost by, again, a really small margin. And because of that, Hillary Clinton didn't become president.
Wow.
And here's why. She lost to Anthony Weiner. And then Anthony Weiner went to Congress. Anthony Weiner met Hillary Clinton's top aide, Huma Abedin, and married her. Anthony Weiner had some bad habits online that resulted in him having to step down and whatnot. But in addition, because he was sharing his computer with his wife, the FBI discovered a bunch of emails on that computer that were relevant to were relevant to the Hillary emails business.
Mhm.
And reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton, something like 10 days before Election Day.
The butterfly
in
effect.
2016, and therefore, probably lost because of that. I mean, the election was so close, you could have lost for a million reasons.
Yeah.
But Anthony Weiner was one of the bigger ones.
Yeah. And that's all the butterfly effect. And like you said, decided by a handful of votes.
And now that I'm remembering, I think it was even further back than that. It might have been a state senate seat or a state assembly seat back in like 2004 or something, way back when.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't remember. The details are elusive.
Right.
You get the idea.
Definitely. And then why fight? Because people fought for this right, and some people died for this right. Going back to 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, right here in New York State, Seneca Falls Convention. They said women should have the same rights as men. A group of, I have the number here, or at least I did. I want to say it was like 300 or so women and male allies gathered to say that women have the same basic fundamental rights as men, one of them being the right to vote. That was in 1848. What year do we think women got the right to vote? 1920, 72 years after the idea was first introduced. Elizabeth Cady Stanton didn't live to see women get the right to vote. And that was 72 years of protesting and lobbying and getting beat up when they go to their board of elections to try to register to vote. This right wasn't given, it was earned. And then the March on Selma in March of 1965, John R. Lewis led a group of 600 peaceful protesters. The plan was to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, to demand that all these arbitrary rules that were in place to suppress Black people from being able to vote be repealed. They set out, they get to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they are met with clubs and they are beaten. And so they go back and they say, okay, we need to reassess. 2 days later, 600 people join, this time with Martin Luther King. They get to the bridge and they're met with the police again. And so they say, okay, we're going to turn around, we're going to pray, we're going to figure out what to do here, because clearly people were trying to stop them from voting. So then 2 weeks later, with the group of them, they're able to successfully march. It takes them 5 days to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama. And by the end of that 5 days, a group that started as 600 people turned into 25,000 people. And then in August of that year, we passed the Voting Rights Act, 1965, which eliminated these arbitrary requirements that used to be in place to vote, which the next slide will show you an example of some of the arbitrary requirements. If you could not prove that you had a 5th grade education, you had to take a literacy test. And this isn't read this short passage to show that you can read. These are deliberate questions to trip people up to stop them from voting. So in the first circle below, write the last letter of the first word beginning with L. Cross out the numbers necessary to make the number 1 million. Draw a line from circle 2 to circle 5 that will pass below circle 2 and above circle 4. In the line below, cross out each number that is more than 20 but less than 30. And they decided to put the number 20 in that line to make matters even more confusing. And you know what I'm going to do here too? Hold on. I want to write this out because when I say it out loud, it doesn't sound right. This is another question. Right. From the left to the right. As you see it spelled here. Right from the left to the right, as you see it spelled here. Print the word vote upside down, but in the correct order. Spell backwards, forwards. So again, people had to march for 5 days so that rules like this could be repealed. And although it was a group of Black people advocating for their rights, this clearly impacts people with disabilities. So it was a right for all.
Well, these aren't just hard questions. They're questions where kind of no matter what you do, the person grading the test can say you were wrong. So it's heads they win, tails you lose.
Exactly. Like they're deliberately designed so that you get them wrong. So, but that is it. Vote as if your life depends on it, because it does. Justin Dart, father of the ADA. You probably see this photo going around every election cycle, but it's true. Thank you. If we got any questions, thank you. No questions. Well, I'll be around for a little bit if people do have questions. We've got voter registration forms up front. So even if you're registered, if you know someone who might not be and might be interested, take a form, take 2.
Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, no problem.
I think I tried to register my daughter. She turned 18 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
She's severely autistic.
Yeah.
So I don't think my history that she didn't vote for Trump. She's vanilla ice cream.
And she could write in vanilla ice cream.
She could write in vanilla ice cream.
It's funny.